But we're going to kind of land the plane unofficially here tonight, and we're going to have some fun doing it. It's going to be great. We've come a long way. We began with defining what marriage is and looked at the meaning of marriage. And then we spent a couple of weeks looking at the roles of the husband and the wife in the marriage relationship. And so we dissected those. We didn't hide anything. We didn't shy away from anything on any side. Probably could have spent an extra week on each one of them, to be quite honest. But we didn't shy away. Last week we covered physical intimacy, and I was glad that one was over at 8 o'clock. I bet I turned every shade of red and purple there was. I don't know, but Jennifer got a good laugh at me back in the car on the way home. Tonight we're going to talk about the long game. And what I mean by the long game is, I kind of gave you the idea of what I mean by the long game in the first line of the outline here. I said it this way: my goal in my marriage is to maintain such a healthy relationship with my wife that I can still gross out my great-grandkids. Do you get what I'm saying? My goal in my marriage is to maintain such a healthy relationship with my wife that when I'm 80, 90 years old, my grandkids, great-grandkids, if the Lord tarries and if I get to live that long, that they're going to be saying, Papa, get a room. Go somewhere else. I want to have that kind of a healthy relationship, that I'm leaving that kind of legacy and I'm leading that kind of an example to generations that have gone on. There's a message that's stirring in my heart that I heard somebody hit on a little bit, but God began to kind of flesh it out a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And it is this idea that you realize that Abraham and Sarah were buried together, right? Abraham and Sarah were buried together. Isaac and Rebekah were buried in the same place together. Jacob and Leah. No. That was when it broke. It broke when we got to Jacob. So you end up with this generational idea of what marriage is, all the way down to death. Oh wait, that isn't so far-fetched, is it? I mean, we stood before a preacher and we said, till death do us part. So how do we get there? How do we end up with the long game? Playing more than just a hand today or this week. But how do we cultivate such a relationship that it can last a lifetime? Now, we're going to look at some scripture that we looked at last week as well. I put 1 through 6. I meant to put 1 through 9. So if you want to change that 6 to a 9, just turn your paper upside down. It'll work, but it won't work forever when you go to look at it again. Change that 6 to a 9. We're going to be looking at Song of Solomon, chapter 7, verses 1 through 9. Now, we're going to read this. I want to read this, and I want you to follow along with me as we read this. And we're going to take this, and we're going to look at it, and we're going to kind of dissect it together and just move through the outline as at a brisk a pace as possible. The word of the Lord reads, this is Solomon speaking, how beautiful are your feet in sandals, O prince's daughter. The curves of your thighs are like jewels, the work of the hands of a skillful workman. I want to just kind of pause right there and let you know that, and we'll get to this here in just a few moments, up to this point in the song, we have seen Solomon. This makes the fourth time that he is describing his bride. The fourth time. The three other times he starts at her head and he works his way down to her feet. On this time, he's starting at her feet and working his way up. Now, I want to read a little further, and we're going to come back to that thought here in a moment. Your navel is like a rounded goblet. It lacks no blended beverage. Your waist is a heap of wheat set about with lilies. Guys, real quick, I told you last week, don't. That does not translate into your game in 2017, all right? I know I said it last week. I want to serve you well. Just as a reminder, I've not met the woman that even if you use that line that they're encrusted with jewels, that she wants her midsection described as a heap of wheat, all right? Your breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. Now, up to this point, as we've navigated, and we've not navigated, but if we had taken the time to begin at Song of Solomon chapter 1 and come all the way to chapter 7, a lot of theologians estimate that at chapter 7, Solomon could have been married up to 20 years up to this point. Possibly married 20 years up to this point. What you have to understand is that there is this thing, this idea, it's a doctrine, but we call it progressive sanctification. What that means is we change. If God gives me till September the 18th, I will have been married 18 years to my bride. She's been at least 4 other women in 18 years. Can I get an amen from any men in the house? I mean, and I'm talking about, I've went to bed with her and woke up the next morning and she likes different things. And you know what? I'm not the same guy that she married. I've changed in 18 years. It's this idea of progressive sanctification. So now when we look at the idea that Solomon has spent all of this time describing his wife from top to bottom, and now he's going from bottom to top. He's starting with her feet and working his way up. You begin to understand that their relationship has changed. I was married when I was 19 years old. Our relationship at 19 years old is a far cry different than at 37 years old. And I expect it will be even more so different at 47 and 57 and 87. It's because we change and we go through life and circumstances have changed. Financially, we've changed. Housing-wise, we've changed. We started off, we spent 4 years in an empty home. Now that's changed. And then, there was the whole up all nights. Now the kids want to sleep until noon. It's changed. Life has changed. We have changed. And oftentimes it is the change that happens in marriage that scares people to death. It is a change in marriage that scares people to death. And they oftentimes will say lines like, "You are not the woman, you are not the man I married." And you know what? They're right. They're right. And rightfully so. But what happens is we begin to reflect and reminisce about certain aspects of an individual that the way things were when we first got married, and we don't realize the progressive change. Now, oftentimes that is said in a very negative connotation, and sometimes it's because there has been a darker, uglier side of an individual that has now come to light, and it's kind of this bait and switch thing that has happened, and maybe in those cases that statement is justified, but I can't expect my wife to be who she was at 19. I can't expect her. Listen, like I said, we've got 3 kids. The time of, hey, let's just run up to Pigeon Forge on a Friday evening, and let's just, we'll go up there and we'll do our thing up there for all weekend, and those days are long gone. I mean, it's a logistics nightmare. Because you have to not only account for yourself, but your finances, because you're paying for 3 little ankle biters along the way too. And not only that, if you're not going to take them, somebody's got to watch them. And outside of that, you've got dogs, and somebody's got to water them and feed them, and they've got to be taken care of. And what do you do about this? And then there's the whole, he's touching me, she's touching me, idea of going down the road. And it becomes a logistics nightmare. Where we're going to stay, what we're going to do, what kind of clothes do we need to pack, and we're different people now. John and Jennifer BC is not the same as John and Jennifer now. So if I want to maintain that relationship, if we want to keep the marriage in fuego, the fire going. And I mean that in every way that just crossed your mind right now. I'm talking about emotionally, spiritually, physically, in all aspects of the relationship. If we want to keep the passion there, the fire there, then we're going to have to do something. And I'm calling it throwing logs on the fire. Now, we all know, we're all in the room, we're familiar with fires. Some of us may have that neat little contraption where you flip a switch and fire. I've never had that luxury. I mean, for me, it's rubbing sticks together, taking flint and steel, or, just doing everything you can, Tinder bundle, looking like, Tom Hanks on that movie, just trying to breathe life into fire, and then when you get it there, then you have to keep feeding it, which means that even once it gets warm and glowing and hot, it won't stay that way. But every so often, every 45 minutes to an hour, you got to go outside in the cold, you got to grab another log, and you got to feed the fire. So that's what we're going to talk about this evening. As we look at where we've come up to at this point, and we recognize that 20 years into this marriage, life has changed for Solomon. How he looks at his wife has even changed at this point. And things are different. The relationship dynamic is different. And how they're going to proceed from here is different. If the first log I want to present to you, that if we're going to keep things going, if we're going to play the long game, the first log on the fire needs to be, you need to pay attention to your spouse. Pay attention to your spouse. Tonight's going to be every bit as practical as spiritual, and maybe more so on the practical side. If you've been waiting on that end for the last several weeks, tonight it's all going to come together for you. Pay attention to your spouse. What I mean by this is take note of the places that they linger a little too long. When he opens up the Bass Pro magazine and he kind of stops and makes note of that Weatherby, take note of it. When she's in the store and she pauses and looks at that outfit that maybe you don't have the money in the bank account right now to get. And she's not going to whine, she's not going to give you a hard time, but she's going to make some kind of passing comment like, oh, that's cute. And she's going to move on. But she spent a little bit more time with that than she did all the other outfits on the racks. Make note of it. you should have, and I said this a few weeks ago, you should have a PhD in your spouse. Learn them. Pay attention to them. What do they like? What do they not like? What stresses them out? And some wives are pointing at their husbands. What stresses them out? What helps them relax? What calms them down? Pay attention. You should know them like only a spouse knows them. Let's read a little further. Verse 4. Your neck is like an ivy tower, your eyes like the pools of Heshbon, by the gates of Bath-rabbim. Your nose is like the tower of Lebanon, another one, just avoid it, which looks towards Damascus. Your head crowns you like Mount Carmel, and the hair of your head is like purple. He's talking about royalty, dignity. A king is held captive in your tresses. How fair and how pleasant you are, O love with your delights. Solomon, the king is held captive by her growth at this point. 20 years. He noticed her from top to bottom. 20 years later, he's looking at her differently, and she is a different woman, but she has progressed along. She's come a long way from this girl. If you read in the early chapters of Song of Solomon, if you look at, I believe it's chapter 3, chapter 4, their wedding night at that point, she's like, don't look at me, I'm ugly. I mean, she's got self-esteem issues, and things are going on. And man, he's still working his game some 20 years later and talking to her, and she's changed up to this point. As a matter of fact, we want to skip down to verse 9. We'll come back and we'll pick up a few here in just a moment. But I want to skip down to verse 9, and I want us to look at something here real quick. She says, she begins to respond in the second half of verse 9. The second half of verse 9, she says, first half of verse 9 says, and the roof of your mouth is like the best wine. We'll get to that in a minute. And she responds in the second half of verse 9. She says, and the wine goes down smoothly for my beloved, moving gently the lips of the sleeper. I am my beloved's, and his desire is towards me. She's changed. She's went from this girl who was saying, don't look at me. I believe the KJV uses the word swarthy. I'm undesirable. My brothers kept me out in the fields, and you know, it's tanned me and tan now and tan then. It's two different ideas, if you will. But she's went from that girl to this girl who, what's she doing here? She's kind of flirting back, isn't she? Oh, that goes down smooth. Say it again. Tell me more. She's went from this girl who says, don't look at me, to keep on. She's changed. She's grown. And in his description, he's making note. There's this bottom to top description where he speaks of her feet, talking about her dignity. He speaks of her nose as a sign of leadership and who she is. He speaks about her head being a crown, like crown with Mount Carmel. Speaking of the respect that she has earned along the way. I mean, he's describing an entirely different woman at this point. He speaks to her inner and her outer beauty. And she responds in like. She says, tell me again. I'm my beloved, and his desire is towards me. Depth of soul can be a powerful aphrodisiac. Depth of soul can be a powerful aphrodisiac. Here's what I mean by that. When a person you've grown together, you've moved from Raya to Ahava, and moved on into Dod, and your souls are now coming together, and you're experiencing this connection one with another, and you begin to grow, and you're growing closer and closer to the Lord. Owen mentioned this to me a couple of weeks ago, and I've heard it my whole life, that as two people, a husband and wife, that are two separate, distinct entities, but as they are brought together in holy matrimony, as the two work their way towards God, they can't help but become closer and closer and closer together. As the two, from two fixed points, begin to work towards the single, universal, center singularity that is God Almighty, they can't help but get closer and closer and closer along the way. And as they're getting closer to God, they're beginning to learn the depth of the soul of the other individual. And listen, I put it this way. I put a note here. I said in this, godliness is sexy to godly people. Can I say that? I just did. You can't stop me. Godliness is sexy to godly people. And that depth of soul can be a powerful aphrodisiac. It becomes this moment where you just look at this person and you see them praying, you see them leading, you see them singing, you see them lifting their hands and praising God. You see them interacting on a spiritual level. You hear them on a phone call guiding and counseling someone in the way to get them closer to God and reaching out. You hear their heart in their conversations and in your prayer time together, and all of a sudden that becomes extremely attractive to you. It may not have been 20 years ago, but it is now. The second log that I wanted to present to you, let's look at this. Let's go back, and we're going to pick up in verse 6 again, and we're going to read on down to verse 9. Solomon's speaking here. He's still describing his bride. He says, how fair and how pleasant you are, O love, with your delights. Does that get an exclamation point at the end of it in your Bible? Okay. That means it's emphatic, right? That means he's wanting to put an emphasis on it. This stature of yours, it's like a palm tree, and your breasts like its clusters. And I said, I will go up to the palm tree, and I want to pause right here and remind you we're reading from the Bible, y'all. All right? I want you to remember, just at the point where you think that the relationship is just this mutual respect, there's still some heat going on here. I will take hold of its branches. Now let your breasts be like clusters of the vine, and the fragrance of your breath like apples, and the roof of your mouth like the best wine. Again, how's he tasting that? I'm just throwing that out there. The second log I would present to you to keep the fire going in your relationship. Pay attention to your spouse. Second, fight for fun. Fight for fun. Laugh often and laugh long. You two have inside jokes that no one else has. You ever find yourself in and maybe not a serious event, but an event where just nobody is kind of laughing, and somebody says something or does something that you two have got an inside joke about, and you kind of just nudge each other, and it's all you can do just not to bust out. Laugh often and laugh long. Spend that time building that kind of relationship. And I've got to put this out here because guys, we're a little different when it comes to this kind of stuff. So I just want to kind of help the ladies out a little bit. If they don't think it's funny, it's not. All right? Jennifer does not like me to take a cup of cold water and pour it on her in the shower. If they don't think it's funny, it's not. I find that hilarious. If they don't, She hasn't. I think it's because I've got the rail too high. She can't reach over top. But it's, if they don't think it's funny, it's not. We do a lot of spook scares in our house. At any given time, somebody is hiding in the hall or something, and you're just going to get, just jumped out at some point. I mean, that's just how we roll. But when you talk about fight for fun, incorporate more than just you and your spouse. You have to have it between you and your spouse, but it'll do you good to incorporate your children into all of this. Now, sometimes this is stuff that is simple. Sometimes this is stuff that, one of the things that we did fall of last year, I spent just a couple of dollars. It wasn't much. I got a bunch of those landscaping rocks. And I got out back and I leveled out a spot and I built us a fire pit right off the back porch. And, the kids love it. We love it. On a cool evening, we'll get out there. We'll build a fire. We'll sit out there with sticks and hot dogs or marshmallows. And it's just us just hanging out, swatting mosquitoes, having a great time. But we have to fight for fun. You have to come up with creative and different ideas to cultivate that along the way. Maybe it is something as simple as those of you that got kids that, you get a tub and you fill it up with water balloons and some of the sorriest squirt guns that you can imagine. Because you and Mom are out back with the good super soakers and the water hose, and you just leave a note that says, Mom and Dad's out back, come find us. And just, have some fun with it. Incorporate the family into it. But fight for fun. Between you and your spouse, find fun, flirty ways to let them know that you're thinking about them. One of the things that I like to do is I'll sneak and grab Jennifer's phone. And every now and then I'll hijack her Facebook or something. But a lot of times I will go in and I will change my name into either something funny or outrageous or stuff that can't be repeated in church. And it's not bad, I promise. But change my name so that when she goes to text me or call me, it takes her a second. Like, who in the world is... Oh. Now, some of you are like, touch my phone and see what happens. She's not said that. She laughs about it. She thinks it's funny. I'll go in and I'll change her screensavers and all of that stuff and just have some fun and it's good. Find fun and kind of flirty ways to let them know that you're thinking about them. Sometimes I will get up here with my notebook and I'll open it to preach. And I may have used 2.5 pages. But she'll sit there and she'll doodle a heart and something right there. And I won't find it until I get up here to preach. just find just fun little flirty creative ways to let them know that you're thinking. And I'm up here in that moment, I can't say anything. Hey, y'all, look at this. But just something fun. Log number 3. Discipline yourself to create romance. Discipline yourself to create romance. I want to tell you a story. Roman buddy, I'm about to rob something from you, okay? Just so you know. I think he's the only guy in here that may potentially at some point ask a girl to marry him. I want to tell you a story about a guy by the name of Dudley Callison. Dudley Callison, I heard a pastor tell this story, and Dudley Callison was one of his friends from Arkansas. And Dudley Callison told him the story of how he proposed to his now wife. And this is what he said. He said he picked his fiance or girlfriend up the day that he was going to propose, and he was in ministry, youth ministry. At the same time, this other pastor was in youth ministry, and he picked her up in his car, and he drove her to a lake. And at the lake, they had some canoes, and there was a little island out in the middle of the lake, so they took the canoes and they worked their way out to the island, and there on the island he had his youth interns go ahead of him, and he set up this nice little lunch for them to have, a little picnic lunch out on the island. And so they're out there eating lunch, and after they got done eating, a speedboat come by and picked them up. And so they were in this speedboat, and they took the speedboat back to shore. And when he got back to shore, his car was gone and a limousine was sitting there. And so they get into the limousine. See what I mean? It's destroying. I have no game compared to this guy. This limo drives them out to a local airfield, and they get in an airplane. A small little puddle jumper airplane, and this airplane flies them out, and they take a tour, and it lands at a local college campus where there's a chapel on that is already set up for a wedding that is going to be happening that weekend. And they go in to look at the decorations at the chapel, and up at the altar there's a card with her name on it. And she goes up and she opens the card, and it just says, "Will you?" And she turns around, he's on one knee, "Marry me." She accepts the invitation. So he goes outside. The limo is now gone. There's an old beat-up pickup truck, and they get into this. It's not even good yet. They get into this old beat-up pickup truck, and they drive to a restaurant where he has flown in all of her friends and family to have this big celebration at this restaurant where he just proposed to her. And after everybody is checked into their motels and it's just them there together, he sits down with her and he begins to explain to her that the car that they picked her up in represented the normalcy that is going to be the rest of their life. And the canoe represented the times that they're going to have to work hard to get to a destination. And the speedboat represented all the fun they were going to have along the way. The limo represented the times when some other thing will be driving them to a destination. The plane was to represent their spiritual journey, and the old truck to the restaurant was symbolic of them growing old together. I dare anybody to top that proposal. Oh, I guess he's old money. You can't do that with new money. You can't do that on a youth pastor's salary. Take it from somebody who knows. You want to know how it happened? I'm in a '88 model S10 pickup truck. I look over at Jennifer. I reach into the pocket that's on the side. I pulled out a ring where it's Valentine's Day. We're in my truck, my 5-speed pickup truck. We just come back from the restaurant where we just had an argument, and I said, hey, you want to get married? I mean, after hearing Dudley's story, you just like, I give up. Oh, yeah, yeah. I told you that story to say this. This is not most men. Dudley Callison is obviously a romantic extraordinaire. The vast majority of us men are not this way. The vast majority, and you know, they're you know, I see ladies shaking their head. Mm-hmm. And say it again, preacher. The vast majority. The vast majority of us are not this way. We have to discipline ourselves to create romance. You remember us last week talking about common grace? The things that God gives us. It's a gift from God, but everybody can enjoy it. The thing is, guys, ladies, we have this common grace that no one had for thousands of years before us, and that's Google. You need ideas for a romantic date, $, search. Maybe you just got your income tax return and you can go romantic date, $. I don't know I don't think you can put a cent sign in, but you may try it. But I don't know. But it will populate 1 million ideas that you did not have to create yourself. Ladies, for the guy who you just are trying to plan something neat, it works for you too. Google works for men and women. And you can search this stuff and you can track it down. And listen, I know. You want to know my biggest struggle with doing a study series on relationships and marriage? Look around at the ones we started off with that aren't here anymore. A lot of people get the idea that I don't need this. I've been married for 50 years. I don't need this. My relationship is good. I don't need this. You know what? You're right. You may not need it. But I bet your spouse won't hate it. They may not need it, but I bet they won't hate it. You trying to invest into the relationship and dig deeper. Log number 4. I'm out of time. I got to move. Log number 4. Break the monotony. Verse 11. Solomon speaking again says, "Come, my beloved, let us go forth to the field. Let us lodge in the villages. Let us get up early and go to the vineyards. Let us see if the vine has budded, whether the grape blossoms are open and the pomegranates are in bloom, and I will give you my love." Break the monotony. Find spaces to reconnect physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Break the monotony. Take some time to get away. It doesn't have to be expensive. As a matter of fact, I know Solomon's king, but he's probably taking her to one of his own vineyards that he already owns. It's not like he's taking a flight out to Napa, California and checking out all of that stuff or hitching up the wagons and heading down to Barnsley or nothing where you have to pay an arm and a leg to do anything. No, it doesn't have to be expensive. Find spaces to reconnect physically, spiritually, and emotionally. If you've got kids, find a babysitter every now and then. If that season is already past you, take some time and just get away, you too. drop $50, and even if you can't get away far, go to Chattanooga and just get away. Go over to Ellijay and just get away. Take some time and break the monotony of it all. Sometimes and you guys have heard me say it, you're going to hear me say it over and over and over again, especially in light of children and youth and adult functions, and especially surrounding things like retreats and revivals and marriage conferences and things of that nature. Sometimes the best environment for change is a change of environment. That'll tweet right there. Sometimes the best environment for change is a change of environment. Sometimes you just got to get away from everything. You've got to get out of Rocky Face and everything that is in Rocky Face that is distracting you. In my case, Chatsworth, wherever it is that you hail from, sometimes you just got to break the monotony and get away for a minute. Just you two, and reconnect. It can be something basic, a little camping trip out away, wherever you can create an environment this way. It's not necessarily, it's good to get away at least overnight, but maybe at least do it for a day. You get up early and you get away and you come back late at night, but try to get away and just get away from it all. Everything that would hinder you from being able to have some time together. The fifth log, maybe the most important, guard against laziness. Guard against laziness. Schedule date nights. Look for opportunities. One of the things that we don't get, me and Jennifer, it seems like over the past couple of months, we've had a little bit more of this than what we've had in a long time past. Maybe it's because our kids are getting a little bit older and they can, stay at home a little bit by themselves, so we're able to kind of slip. But even before then, one of the things that I've done for years now is I would take payday, because that's normally the only day I can afford it, and I would budget out $20 a week. That was my cap. And we would have a lunch date. And during our lunch, we would meet somewhere in the middle and at a restaurant. We would eat, just us, and just talk and have just a little lunch day. You figure 15 minutes there, 15 minutes back, you're with each other 30 minutes. But it is often the best 30 minutes that money can buy. Schedule a date time. If you can make a date night, that's even better. Look for opportunities, marriage retreats, seminars, studies, functions, things of that nature. Some of them are set in some really neat areas like Gatlinburg, Asheville, North Carolina, things of that nature. Go on your social media accounts and like pages like Focus on the Family and Marriage Matters Now. Folks like that, they will offer you good, godly retreats. A lot of times they'll come relatively local, and you can look for those opportunities. If you see something, listen, this is a good time for iron to sharpen iron. If you know of something that's local, don't be afraid to let us know so that we can kind of get the word out to our congregation, because even if you and your spouse aren't going, there may be another couple that could benefit from that. And even better, if you are going, that oftentimes will help build a snowball to get some other folks. They won't feel as uncomfortable, let's go together kind of thing. But if you know it and nobody else does, then it's not doing anybody any good. So, help us as a congregation get the word out and share the word internally. Put the cell phone away. Here's what happens at 365 Chandler's Ridge way too often than it should. We find ourselves finally getting the kids settled down, in bed. We've got showers. I'm finally back in the house from working on something, and we find our way sliding into bed together, and both of us are like this. I'm off on some comic book tangent in the rabbit hole that only heaven knows how long I've been there. She's over there on Pinterest swiping Joanna Gaines feeds. I mean, there's this nifty human right next to me that I can connect with on several different levels. And I'm choosing my phone over personal connection. Maybe you set up your charging station for your devices in the living room instead of the bedroom. Just an idea. All right, I got to move. I know I've already went over. So those are the logs on the fire. Now, I want to talk about, just for a moment, a couple of other things. We're talking about log on the fire. We're talking about decisions. Then we're going to talk about empty nesting. And I'm going to get through these as quick as I can. Decisions. Proverbs chapter 23, verse 19. This is in the NLT. When it comes to decisions oftentimes are a point of contrition within a marriage relationship, especially the big decisions, especially the tough things that are to be decided on. I'm not talking about, what brand shampoo we use or what's for supper. I'm talking about the car's broke down. Will we get it fixed, or is it, worth fixing? Do we get another one? Jennifer and I had an experience a couple weeks ago. Our dryer went out. What do? Because first world problems begin to kick in. Y'all know first world problems, right? In third world countries, they wonder where supper's going to come from. In first world that we live in, you can't wash clothes if you can't dry them, apparently. So it becomes this dynamic of what do? The dryer's out. So, you're going to want socks at some point. You can only turn your underwear inside out once. What do you do? And so, decisions like this. So, Proverbs chapter 23, verse 19, in the NLT, it reads this way: "My child, listen and be wise. Keep your heart on the right course." My child, listen and be wise. Keep your heart on the right course. Decisions have to be made wisely. Now, when it comes to decisions in our house, here's how we operate. Jennifer and I both seek to this idea that our yes is on the table. I want to do this, yes. All right, now from yes, let's look at, is it possible? Is it godly? Does it edify? Does it steer us off of the course that as a family we need to be? Does it hinder us from being able to pay our bills, from taking care of our family, to giving to the church like we're supposed to? If not, then we can begin to find a way. Yes does not always mean now. Yes sometimes means 5 years from now. But our yes is on the table with each other. Between a marital relationship, if you respect the other individual in how they think and how they approach problems and situations, both of you having your yes on the table becomes a whole lot easier. Now, having your yes on the table is not a cop-out to just say yes to everything. Like I said, you have to kind of set criteria around it by which you determine, is this, I want to, is it healthy for us as a family? If it's not healthy for us as a family, then we don't. And we both can agree to that. So is your yes on the table? Are you seeking God in these decisions? I put a space out beside that. This is discernment. It's a spiritual gift. Some excel in it more than others. but it is being able to be sensitive to the moving of the Spirit in your life as to what is going on around you. So a lot of people have a sense of discernment, about people, about circumstances, about situations. You want a good sense of spiritual discernment about major decisions in your relationship. We need a dryer. Got to get a dryer. Where can we get the best deal? Well, Sears is going out of business. Well, you go over to Sears and they still haven't marked anything down. They say they have, but they ain't. All right, you check with Lowe's, you check with, you begin to shop it out. You go here, I'll go there, we'll get the best price. All right, now we've got the best price. We know what we can, what we're looking at to be able to get. Now, how do we pay for it? How do you get the money? Do you put it on credit card? You really don't want to. Do we, just not eat for the next 2 months? What do we do? How do you make this happen? So you're going back and forth. You recognize what's going on, and with a sense of discernment and focus on each other, you're able to make the right decision respectfully between each other. Husbands, you carry the weight. If a husband is doing his job in the marriage, his wife is like a well-watered vine. She gets to flourish and be healthy and nurtured and well taken care of, and she just gets to bloom and be everything that she is supposed to be. But in that relationship, the husband carries the weight of that, which means, this isn't preached well in probably any church, but this means that, like it or not, from a biblical perspective, he's going to have to carry the brunt weight. When he gets before God, whether or not you should have put that credit card or that dryer on the credit card or not, God isn't going to look to you, he's going to look to him. And so submission is not about just being a doormat by which you're walked on and he gets the final say-so. But when it comes to how you answer to God, he's going to have to carry the weight. And so it's going to come down to somebody has to finally pull the trigger one way or another. And ladies, you need to respect how that falls, because he should already be respecting all the input that you provided. And he needs to be, it may not be what he wants to do. Remember, his yes is on the table. It may not be the decision that he would have made, but because of the input and the homework and everything that you bring to the table, he's like, you know what? I don't want to do this, but I agree with you that it is best for us. And so he has to carry the brunt of that weight. Sometimes, I believe it was Priscilla Schreier, it might have been Beth Moore, said that sometimes submission means you duck so God can swing. All right, empty nesting. I went too long. Empty nesting. Several folks in our congregation are at this level. Some of us are headed toward that level. God willing, at some point, if I get to live, at some point, I've got 3 beautiful kids. I've got 2 daughters that have my heart. I have a teenage daughter that is wrecking my nerves, but she's got my heart. I've got a little bitty curly-haired girl that is a female version of me in the way she thinks and the way she talks and acts. And I've got my little dude, Landon, that he's my buddy. He's my shadow. He's everything that I wish I was at his age, minus a little bit of attitude. But they've got me. But there will come a day when they will pack their stuff and they will get out of my house. And all 3 of the times that happens, I'll lament. I'll cry. but it's right, it's biblical, and it's holy. But I don't want to be that guy that when that happens, I turn around and I look at my wife, who's changed at least another 4 times. And I say, who are you? So let's talk about empty nesting. If we're going to empty nest spiritually, physically, emotionally, rightly, biblically, if we're going to play the long game, and even after the nest is empty and we're able to navigate into those waters, if we're going to make it and we're going to do well at it, if we're going to thrive and flourish in it, we're going to have to long for and pursue God more than our marriage. Right now, and even then, if you're there now, it's not too late to start. If you're not there, and that's coming in the future, you need to long for and pursue God more than marriage. John, you just talked about spending all this time, all this energy, all this money into seeking it into your marriage. That's because it was godly to do it. As I'm seeking God, as I'm longing God, and I'm pursuing God, remember, 2 of us, 2 separate, distinct entities, moving both to God. We're going to come closer together. So it means I'm going to have to set my priorities, and I'm going to have to do it biblically. God is first. My spouse is second. And mamas, kids are third. I say mamas because that normally affects mamas more than it does daddies. I know a few daddies that it's flip-flop, but we have to get our priorities in order. God has to be first in our life. Our spouse is second. God will never leave us. Our spouse could leave us. Our children will leave us. So let's get it in order. God's going to be first. Our spouse is going to be second. Our kids are going to be third. And it has to go in that order. Everything else falls behind that. But we've got to get our house in order. We've got to pursue our priorities biblically. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. If you don't spend this time now putting logs on the fire, when it comes to time to empty nest, you have failed to prepare all of these years. So you're preparing to fail. And you don't want to be there. You want, when that time comes, as I said earlier, you can gross out your grandkids and your great-grandkids. You want to be those people. So work toward it. You got to get your priorities right. You've got to begin to prepare for that day. That's going to take some internal looking. Where do I want to be at that point? A lot of times us as men, we have our identity set in our how we provide our identity is often in our living. And if that's the case, that's an unhealthy status to be living from. So you need to move from the fact that I am not my job. I'm someone who does a job. Hopefully I do it well and to God's glory. But I am not my job. I'm a child of God. I am a husband to Jennifer. I am a father to 3 really neat kids. And somewhere on down the line, I'm an employee of this company, whatever that company is. I have to, Mama, your identity is not wrapped up in your kids or your job. That's not who you are. If we're not careful, we can take our love for them and we can put them before our husband. Now, husband, that doesn't mean that just because she's paying a little attention to the kids and being a good mama, that you get to get jealous over that? But it should be healthy. I read a recent article that there is now an issue with, couples coming together not having kids is becoming a more frequent thing. It's not always that they can't have kids, they just choose not to have kids, and that's their decision. That's all fine and well. But oftentimes along the way, what they do is they'll incorporate a dog. Sometimes they even got kids and they'll have dogs. And there seems to be this increasing trend. I heard on the radio today they were talking about it, where in many cases you're finding where wives are taking more pictures of their dogs and posting them on social media than they are their spouses. Now, sometimes the dog does look better. I'll give it to you. And sometimes the husband just don't want his picture taken. I'm that guy for the most part. But the article went into talking a little bit more that there seemed to be more of a connection with the dog than with the spouse, and that's where it gets unhealthy. And I know dogs and kids are nowhere in this, but if you're not careful, you become the mom of this, the mom of these, the mom of him, the mom of her, instead of the wife of. And the priorities are lost. We have to be careful with that. I have seen relationships, and this even extends into the grandkids, that the two did not invest like they should years up. Now grandkids have come along, so now grandma is a little bit more financially independent because, well, she don't have kids to pay for anymore. Cars are getting paid off, house is getting paid off, and so financially they're a little bit more secure than what they used to be, and now it's all about the grandkids, and the grandkids become a substitute. And again, it's unhealthy. I'm not saying don't be a good grandma or don't be a good grandpa. Be engaged in their life. Leave the legacy. That is not your priority before your spouse. All right. So I've said this. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Put logs on the fire. I've got to close. It's way late. Anybody got any questions, comments, concerns? Anything you want to say, add to, take away? Mm-hmm. If you can. Yep. Yep. Somebody asked me a couple of weeks ago about how do you get somebody who may be struggling in certain areas. You know, you may not be able to get them to listen and understand these things. And I gave a little bit of insight, but I got to thinking about that and praying about that a little bit more. And I can't remember who it was that was asking me about this. But sometimes you can invest into them, and you can encourage certain things along the way. What I mean by that, and you was speaking of just that, there was a couple that is near and dear to mine and Jennifer's heart, and they lost a baby. This was several years ago, and they were struggling. This was affecting their marriage, and it was becoming it was a powder keg. And so we chipped in a couple of bucks and had a friend that is a whole lot like Dudley. Got some jack, and they chipped in the rest, and we got them a room, just them. We arranged for their kids to be taken care of on a certain weekend. And we got them a little bit of spending money, got them a room, and we said, here, y'all need to go. Just you two. Sometimes it's not always about preaching Jesus. Sometimes it's more powerful to be Jesus. And I know you're not Jesus, but we're called to be his hands and feet in this world we live in. And sometimes some of the more powerful things we can do is do what he would have done and minister to the situation. And so sometimes we can create an environment that allows them to experience these things. Some of the things Mike could do is book them at a marriage conference and pay for it. And you know that's tough. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know your tax bracket, but if that's in your ability, then maybe that's an idea. Maybe and so, you know, once you do something like that and you eliminate their reasons not to, then you pretty much put them in a situation where they can flourish possibly in an area like this. Sit down with them, and I wish all of these were recorded, and say, hey, you know, let me get you all these videos and stuff, and hey, here's some handouts or something like that, and you know, just give them resources, give them opportunity, and sometimes that's the most powerful thing you can do. Anybody else? Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Somebody has to be the one who makes the decision. Yeah, you end up in a stalemate. Yep. Anybody else? Hope you've enjoyed this study. Like I said, we may extend it if I can work out some details. If not, we'll go somewhere. I promise you. Looking at some stuff on Sundays in August, praying toward all of that. But if you got any emoji type stuff, let me know. I could use some of that for August. But let's pray, and then we'll dismiss. Remember our ice cream thing this coming Sunday night. Remember service Sunday morning. Looking forward to what God's going to do this coming Sunday in all aspects of our services. And I plan to have our Labor Day flyers ready by Sunday as well, so we can get those out. Let's pray. Father, in the name of Jesus, I thank you for this opportunity to be here. I pronounce blessing upon multiplied blessing on all the relationships represented in this room. And I just pray, God, that you will give us strength, that you'll give us patience, that you will give us peace, that you will give us healing where we need it. God, that you will give us direction and wisdom, that you will give us that discernment, Father, that you will give us a passion for you and a passion for each other. Guide us and direct us, Father. Keep us safe as we go home, we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.